The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and on today's episode, we will be talking about Mayor John Tory. Mayor John Tory, for those of you that don't know, is the current mayor of Canada's largest city, in Toronto. He was also a failed provincial politician and ran under the Conservative Party and had a chance to oust the unpopular Kathleen Wynne government at the time, but failed miserably at his attempt and decided that he would go after city politics after hosting a show on a local radio talk show, 1010 CFRB at 10:10 a.m. And there he spent the year putting himself in a position where he could talk about how he was running for mayor for the next year. It was free advertising, and of course, CFRB 1010's not going to say no, and John Tory happens to have very strong family connection ties with one of Canada's most powerful families, the Roger family. Roger Communications owns television and radio stations throughout the nation. They also own telecommunications. They also own cable. So any form of communications, Rogers own it. They actually even own newspapers as well. Now, John Tory sits on the board after Ted Rogers died. John Tory sits on the board controlling how that money is spent. And when he became mayor of Toronto, you guessed it, he made sure that Rogers Communication was always well looked after. And in fact, there's only two companies in Toronto that can sell cable TV, and that happens to be Toronto and the other monopoly of Bell Media. But today's article is about an integrity issue, because it seems that after you've done this for an entire lifetime and a career, it finally comes back to you. So this is taken from CP24, and the article from July 27th reads, "An integrity complaint has been filed against Mayor John Tory for not declaring an alleged conflict of interest when commenting and voting to end the active TO program given his ties to Rogers Communication. Toronto resident and civic activist Adam Clafe provided documents to CP24 stating that he had filed a complaint with Toronto's Integrity Commissioner about Tory's public comments and vote to end the program on Lakeshore Boulevard West. Calif alleges that Tory contravened sections of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act by discussing and voting against extending the outdoor program after the Blue Jays, who are owned by Rogers, publicly said active TO was impacting their business. Tory is a shareholder of Roger Communications and has a long personal history with both Rogers family and telecom giant, where he ran two different subsidiaries back in the 90s. Also, to note, he was the CEO at one point of Rogers Communications. The sequence of events gives rise to concerns that Mayor Tory violated Sections 5, 5.1, 5.2 of the agreement, and the Integrity Commissioner has a duty to conduct an inquiry into the matter and utilize the powers of investigation in Part 5 of the City of Toronto Act 2006. The documents state, the Integrity Commissioner, Jonathan Batty, is an independent officer who oversees the conduct of elected and most appointed officials in Toronto. The Commissioner also conducts investigations into allegations about breached standards. Tory says the Commissioner's office has not yet been in touch with Tory about the complaint, and that he first heard about it through a media inquiry from the Toronto Star. Tory added that the matter has been a broad-based discussion and that he has followed the rules while addressing it. I follow the rules. I think people trust me to follow the rules. I've done it, in a very deliberate manner over the time that I've been mayor. And the integrity commissioner I respect a great deal, and he has not yet been in touch with me about this, Tory told CP24 Wednesday morning. We will deal with it as we deal with these kinds of things before, but I am confident that I follow the rules, and I continue to follow the rules, and I will continue to follow the rules. I've been very transparent about this. In the summer of 2020, the city implemented active TO, which closed off select city streets, including Lakeshore Boulevard West, to vehicle traffic on weekends in order to give pedestrians, cyclists, and runners space to physically distance amid the COVID-19 pandemic. While some residents enjoyed a car-free experience, others expressed their frustration with rising levels of traffic, particularly in recent months as more people are commuting into the city due to improved pandemic conditions. Now, if you notice, we talk about a lot about COVID-19 on the show. You can go back and listen to our old episodes on droidscanada.com and go take a look at how we've covered the pandemic over the last 2 years. And you can see that CP24, mainstream media, legacy media, is still calling this a pandemic. And let's notice the turn, because we're going into the winter, we're going to go into flu season. This is not uncommon that we do go into the flu in winter and in fall, and we've covered the statistics on those. We have broken down week over week of when those increases were. So keep in mind, the article is written with this anticipation that it is going to go back up and the pandemic is still continuing on. They'll keep on playing that narrative. But back to the article. In June, Tory said council had received a report from city staff about the impacts of the program on vehicle traffic on weekends. Tory spoke publicly on the matter and said that the program would not be eliminated entirely, but instead will demonstrate a balance between easing traffic flow and continuing car-free streets at times. I have the traffic data. There's no question that it had a bigger adverse impact on traffic during that time, Tory told CP24 on June 8th. All I can say is we are very carefully examining all of those results, data, and the actual real evidence as opposed to stories. In light of the news about council considering changes to active TO road closures, Toronto Blue Jays president Mark Shapiro sent a letter to the mayor and city staff asking for council to not vote in favor of extending the program on Lakeshore Boulevard West. Now, going back, John Tory did hold the CP24 1010 News Talk 1010 talk show, and during that time he did talk about how if he was mayor he would want to make space available for bikers and cyclists and pedestrians to use cities' streets, to shut down Yonge Street. And that was one thing that he discussed in great length and over a great couple of weeks about how he was going to do this. But now that all of a sudden that he's mayor, and now all of a sudden that he's in conflict of how the Toronto Blue Jays operate their business, that's a concern. The Toronto Blue Jays are a major sports franchise that draw millions of fans to Rogers Centre every season. Given the unprecedented levels of construction and other diversions in downtown Toronto, removing one of the only ways in and out of the downtown core would be extremely challenging to our fans, who rely on these routes to attend our games, Shapiro wrote in his letter on June 6th. One thing that is interesting, that the Toronto Blue Jays are the only organization in Major League Baseball that instruct both home and away teams to not engage with the fans. After the giant strike that happened in the 2003 year, going back to when the Blue Jays, when the Blue Jays went back to back, the 92 year, not 2003, sorry, 92, 93, and the 94 strike, and that would have been where the Blue Jays and the Montreal Expos would have ended up most likely in a World Series clash. But after that time, there was such a decline in fans for the next few years that Major League Baseball decided, how do we reach out? How do we get fans back? Because the strike came down to millionaires and billionaires arguing about salaries. So what Major League Baseball did at that time is try to engage with fans and wanted and encouraged athletes to reach out to children in the stands and prior to games and interact with children by signing baseballs and signing bats and signing things in order to get more families back into the ballpark. Now, the Toronto Blue Jays are the only organization in baseball that instruct the players not to do this, to actually go against what Major League Baseball does. Toronto is not a family-friendly town. It is not a wonderful city as much as everyone would like to say it is. It's a city controlled by very rich people, like all over the world, but a very small group of people. And they do have a tight control on how the city is run. Now, on June 15th, City Council reviewed city staff's traffic data and recommendations and voted to limit the number of active TO closures on Lakeshore Boulevard West this summer. Instead of reoccurring weekend closures, the closures will be limited to special events and will be based on several factors, including the number and location of planned street events in the city on a given weekend. Chalif's complaint argues that Tory had a conflict of interest in the matter and that he shouldn't have spoken publicly about it or vote to end the program given his involvement with Rogers. As a member of the Rogers Control Trust Advisory Committee, Mayor Tory has an indirect interest in any matter that affects the finances, economic prospects, and or property value of the Toronto Blue Jays and the Rogers Centre, and was required to declare this interest, the documents state. Municipal lawyer John Mascarin says the complaint appears valid, but the Commissioner's office will have to decide whether Tory's actions were reasonable. Mayor Tory, I just heard, he's indicated it's a board-based interest, and that's one of the concerns that the court would have. They would say, hold on, would a reasonable person be likely to think that the mayor was influenced in making decisions one way or another because Rogers? And I think ultimately, the reasonable person would say, I don't really think so, he told CP24 Wednesday afternoon. The mayor's office says it wouldn't make any further comments about the matter as it's before the commissioner. We respect the integrity commissioner and we won't be making any further comment about this while the complaint is in front of him beyond what we said at the time. This vote was about a city program that the mayor introduced and championed through the pandemic. And this was a very broad public issue involving all road users in the city. Tory's executive director of communications, Don Pete, said in a statement. So I'll leave it with you. What do you think? What do you think about the situation? Is somebody that is employed and has been employed and owns shares in a company that sits as a mayor, do you think that he can make those decisions about closing down the city or closing down streets so people can enjoy their lives while the business that he also represents is going to be losing a lot of money? You can always reach out to us, droidscanada.com, and you can reach out to us on Facebook, on Twitter. We'd love to hear what your comments are. Until then, I'd like to thank you for tuning in this week. You've been listening to The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant. See you next week.
Dan, what happens every Thursday?
That would be DCR Droids Canada Radio.
And what time is it at on Thursday?
That's from 9 till 11 p.m.
Dumb question. Where do you find it?
You find that at accessradio.ca.
And what's the best part?
It's